My name's Luke. I'm a client education specialist, part of the client experience team. I look after any sort of video content, sort of walkthrough guides, hosting classes just like this as well, and I help with creating our YouTube video series to help self-employed sort of know where to begin, how to start their businesses, and what to look out for. So that's it from me, and I'll just pass over to Katie to give you a short and sweet introduction as well.
Hello. Yeah, it was very similar to Luke, client education specialist, working as part of the client experience team. I do a little bit less video work than Luke does. He's our video expert. So I focus mainly on like written communication. So if you're seeing some nice welcome packs and various other information coming out, that's usually stuff that myself and Luke have been working on.
Perfect, thank you, Katie. Right, so what we're going to go through today, I'll give you a sort of summary of what we're going to cover. I know that you've probably all read the emails, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and we know exactly what we're going to go through. So what we'll look at today is the basic setup of your account. So adding your business details, uploading your business logos, changing any of the settings like your trading address, if you ever move address, things like that. We'll look at adding your bank accounts, and we'll talk to you about open banking as well, because it's a really, really powerful and useful feature to have. We'll look at creating suppliers and recording your expenses. We'll give you some hints and tips about them as well. So things like Snap, which is an app that you can get on your phone. You can quite literally just take a photo of a receipt while you're on the go, and it'll import the information to your account. We'll touch on recurring expenses. So these are ways of automating regular expenses like direct debits and standing orders, so that you don't have to keep manually punching in the same pieces of data every single week or month or however often it is that you're paying for items. We'll look at adding new clients and also raising, issuing and sending your invoices, and that's done directly through your Crunch account, so you don't have to manually download the invoice, upload it to your personal email address and then send it. You can do everything from the Crunch free software. And we'll also give you a short and sweet breakdown of what bank reconciliation is. We're not going to go into too much detail about that, primarily because it's kind of its own beast entirely, and I don't think we'd actually do it justice if we just whiz through it, because there is quite a lot to it, and there's many reasons why bank reconciliation needs to be done. But we will explain why bank rec is so important. And we've actually got another masterclass coming up in a couple of weeks to go through all of the ins and outs of bank reconciliation. So that will be how to do it, what common problems you might run into, as well as what you actually need to do once you've reconciled and got everything up to date. And lastly, we'll give you an introduction to our help center. So these are the resource materials that Katie mentioned she works on as well. So these are guides, instructions, video content, everything that you'll ever need to make your life using Crunch Free super easy. So with all that being said, I think we can probably jump straight into the demo now. And have you got anything you want to add, Katie?
No, I think that's good. Let's get started.
Cool, let's crack on then. So when you sign up to Crunch Free, you only really have a couple of questions. So you enter your own sort of details, and then you've got your account, right? So then you've got your login info in a couple of minutes. Now the first page that you're going to see is this. So this is exactly what a brand new account looks like. If this is your first time seeing Crunch Free, you're going to see this. If you have had a go at Crunch Free before, the only thing really that's probably different to you at the moment is perhaps some of these buttons have changed. But overall, this is your home dashboard. So over here, you've got just a welcoming message. This is dynamic. So as you add new items to your account and you start to build it, this will change. So you might see things like handy tips about, what expenses can you claim? So keep your eyes peeled on that, because it might actually give you an answer to something that you're thinking about already. Over here, you've got some prompts to the add-on services that we have. So like Snap, for example, that I mentioned a moment ago. So also keep your eyes peeled there, because you might have something that you could just add on to your Crunch free account. Now, in terms of starting and where to begin, the foundation, the very first thing that you should all be doing is adding your bank accounts. Okay, I mean, this list here is more or less a sort of step-by-step startup guide in a way, but you'll see on both occasions, whether it's an invoice or expense, the bank account is the first one in the list. Now, the reason for this is that you want to, of course, make sure that you've got your bank account added so that you can start creating expenses, so that you can start raising your invoices and sending them out to clients with your banking info included. So make sure that you just press add bank account. It doesn't matter which one you press, just make sure you press either one. And from here, you can now start entering details of your business bank account. So the display name is just what you want it to be known as. That doesn't get sent on the invoice or anything. This is just helping you to distinguish different accounts if you've got more than one. You can keep it as simple or make it as complicated as you want. It's entirely up to you. So I'm going to keep it real simple and just say current. The bank is just, well, who is the provider? Who is it that you're banking with? And then it asks you for the opening balance. Now, this is really important. So Katie, I don't know if you wanted to maybe give us a breakdown on why opening balance is.
Sure. So I mean, your opening balance basically tells Crunch where you're starting from. So if you've been trading for a while and you've been working for a number of years, you need your first balance in Crunch to follow on from the end of your previous year. So for example, if you got to the end of last tax year and you had, £10,000 in your account, you want your next transaction to follow on from that. So you need to let us know what your opening balance will be, so that Crunch can then work out and calculate the correct balances for when you're matching up all your entries going forwards. And this is just really important, just so that you can make sure that you haven't missed anything and that your records are reflecting an accurate bank balance, so you can see where you're at in your Crunch account at all times then.
Perfect, yeah, and it'll always give you an indicator as to where you need to set this from. So as we can see, mine says the 6th of April 2020. So all you really need to do is just go back, get a bank statement, go onto your online bank account, whatever it is, and have a look at the very first transaction on this particular date, and then enter that amount here. Obviously, if you're brand new and you've only just opened the bank account, the chances are that it's probably going to be zero, right? In which case, that's fine, just leave it as it is. But as Katie mentioned, if you have previous periods, you've just got to make sure that they tally up from one to the next as well. So I'm going to leave this as zero for now, because it's a brand new account. I've just started. Underneath, now this question here is, for sole traders, the likelihood is you're all going to be using your own personal bank accounts, right? It's not like a limited company where you have to have a specific business bank account in your company name. So our advice here, now this might sound a little bit confusing, but the reason that there's two here is because even as a sole trader, you kind of want to separate your business funds from your own. It's just nice to know that whatever's in your personal account is yours. That's as simple as it is, and whatever's in the business account has got to be accounted for. Now, you don't have to do this, bearing in mind, but I would strongly recommend considering separating your personal bank to one that you solely use for your sole trader business. Obviously, just make sure that you select whatever it is that you are using. If it is just a personal and you're happy doing that, fine. You're not going to get in trouble for it. Don't worry. You can still use that. But as I say, for the sake of knowing what is your money and what's your business's money, it might be worth considering a business bank account. And I mean, in which case you've already done that, excellent. Just select business bank account instead. Okay. Now, the last box is just a verification box. You just need to tell us that it's a pound sterling only account. Crunchfree doesn't unfortunately support foreign bank it has to be a pound sterling account. So make sure you verified that by using this box here. And lastly, as simple as this sounds, sort code and account number, there is a very good reason why you've got to make sure that you're entering this correctly. In fact, there's two. The first one being is, importantly, your client's going to want to know which account to pay into, and you want to make sure that it's paid into the correct one. You don't want somebody else receiving the money for your service. Secondly, it gives you access to the open banking feature that I touched on at the start of the summary of this. So that'll allow your Crunch free account to recognize automatically, you don't need to do anything just apart from putting the sort code in correctly, that you've got an open banking feed available. So if I go ahead and put this in now, and I'll pop the account number in as well, and then I'll go ahead and press save. This takes me back to a banking dashboard, right? So as we can see, I'm now in the banking accounts and cards section. So this is the main dashboard for your bank accounts. And it's actually added our card, I guess, if you want to call it that we just created to this dashboard. So it's got current, it's got the sort code, account number, it's got the balance that we'd set as well. So if you have put in a specific number, that will show here, and a couple of other different options, which we'll touch on later in the bank reconciliation masterclass. But the important thing to keep your eye open for is this icon here. So if there is an open banking feed available for you, you'll see this, and it will say, hey, look, you've got a free feed that's available for this bank account. Now, a breakdown of what open banking is, it's a way of connecting your online bank account to your Crunch free account. And that means that, you know, every couple of weeks, every month, your bank statements automatically get fed into your account. And that's so important for bank reconciliation and keeping your accounting records up to date. It's one of those things where I almost want to say, if it's there and it's free, just do it, because you'll save yourself time, you'll save yourself a little bit of a headache with regards to having to manually import statements as well. You know, if the feed's not available, it's not the end of the world. You can still complete bank reconciliation and update your records. But it does mean that you have to manually download them from your bank. You then have to import them manually into your Crunch account. And hand in hand with this, sometimes there can be formatting issues. So you may have to actually play with the file itself before you can get it to upload in your account. So yeah, as I say, if it's there, just get it done as early as possible as well. And then you can start letting your bank account feed your statements in for you automatically. I think there's actually quite a few different bank accounts that this works with now. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but it's certainly the biggest high street banks as well, isn't it, Katie? So
It is,
Santander,
yeah.
HSBC, Barclays.
Barclays. I want to say that there's quite a few others. I can't think of them now.
I think there's some others like Tide as well, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
Revolut,
Tide,
I
Metro
think.
Bank.
Metro. Yeah,
Yeah,
Revolut's one
quite a
that
few.
we've just added, isn't it? So that's quite a new
Yes, Revolut has
addition.
just been added. Worth mentioning though that they are only available for your business bank accounts, not your personal bank accounts. So it is another good reason to get yourself set up with a business bank account.
That's very true. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, the last thing you want is your own personal bank
Yeah.
statements being fed into a software. So yeah, that's a very good point and ties in nicely. So that's it when it comes to setting up a current or even a savings account. So let's go ahead and just create a credit card account so you can see the process in full. So this time, because now we've got an existing card here already, if you wanted to add more in the future, go to banking, accounts and cards, and in the bottom right hand corner, you've got this little icon here. So press that. You've got a couple of options. Is it a bank account or is it a credit card? I'm going to go ahead with credit card. And now all I need to enter is very similarly to the last form, right? So the name is just what I want to know it as. So if you do end up with more than one credit card, you can just name them as you wish to help distinguish them from one another. The last four on the digits on the card, simple enough. And it's the same opening balance question again. So we won't chew your ears off about that once more, but just bear that in mind that you will also need to do the same thing. And again, exactly the same checkboxes as before as well. So I'm going to go ahead with that. I'm going to confirm that it's there, that it's £8, save it. And now this has been added almost like a stack. So as if you do end up with loads of different accounts and cards, these just get added and they do get separated by these headers as well. So you can easily know, okay, well, that's my bank or savings and these are all my credit cards. If at any point you needed to edit info, you know, say you did just leave this one as a current and then you added something else later and you wanted to change this name, fine, just press edit and then you can make that change there. And it's the same with credit cards as well. So that's it when it comes to banking. Super quick, super easy. You know, there really isn't anything else to it, I don't think. Did you want to add anything more?
No, I think that covers everything that we need at this stage for it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so next up then is going to be expenses. So by this point, there's one of two scenarios that will have occurred. You've either just started out fresh and you're only needing to create expenses for perhaps business startup costs. So maybe you've paid for a website, maybe you've paid someone to create a logo or something for you, or maybe even you've bought some equipment that you're now using for the sake of the business, or materials, or whatever it is. The other scenario is that you've actually been trading for a long time and you're now backdating some of your info as well. So in any case, it makes sense to make the next step of your Crunch3 setup sorting out the expenses. So in order to do that, go to the expenses menu here, and then you want to firstly go to suppliers. Now, the reason you want to go to suppliers first is because these are the people or places that you're buying products or services from. So this can be things like Amazon, for example, that would be a supplier. Apple would be a supplier. I mean, even things like food and public transport, you could also list as suppliers, because all a supplier is a reference point for you to start creating your expenses against. So if I were to create a new one now, I'd go to the bottom right, press this button down here. Now I need to enter a name. Now this is, like I said, just how I'm going to know what the expenses I'm creating, what they're for. So if I wanted to do a supplier for Amazon, you can do that. And then the default expense type, it's worth, for more niche expenses at least anyway, you know, like Amazon, if you are buying equipment, it's worth setting a default expense type against them, because when you come to raise a new expense using this supplier, it'll automatically select the expense type for you. And I'll show you that when we go through the expense creation process. So I'm going to set this one as equipment cost. Then I'm going to go ahead and press save. Now I'm going to create another supplier. This time I'll do, Katie, throw me one to do.
Oh, who do we buy things from? Smiths.
Smiths.
Got to buy some nice stationery. Need some
Right.
post-it notes.
Need some post-it notes. All right, so
Yeah.
Smiths, and then we'll put, so that's going to go down as, there you go, print in postage, stationery, and then I'll save that. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because just have a think about all of the places that you are likely to buy things from or spend or spend money on. So things like Amazon, like Smiths, or if you're buying food, you know, I'd go through this now and just create a supplier for food. And then I'd set this expense type to be subsistence, which is just another word for food. And I'd save that. Then I'd also do the same for public transport, let's say. Okay, so all I'm doing at this stage is I'm actually prepping my account so that I can start using these suppliers to record my expenses against. Now, this makes it really quick, so that when you record your expenses, it's just a case of picking them from a list. So yeah, just have a sit down, have a mull over what it is that you're likely to spend money on. The list can be as long as your arm, don't get me wrong, you're not going to be stopped when you get down to the bottom of the page. So just add in whatever it is that you think you are going to expense on, and add that in. Now, things like these two, for example, Kate, do you want to explain why I've created these as these rather than specifically
Yeah,
saying
sure.
who they are?
So when you have slightly more generic expenses such as food, you're likely to be going to lots of different suppliers. So just to save yourself from having a list that's 10 pages long, use a kind of generic name for it. So you can use something like food, and that way you can put all your coffees, your sandwiches, whatever else you're getting while you're out and about, all under one single supplier name, rather than having every single cafe, coffee shop, supermarket. You've got it all in one place then, so it's nice and easy to find, keeps it all compact in your account for you. Simple
Yeah.
as that.
Yeah. And what's more actually is when you're, when you're doing things like a self-assessment, HMRC don't actually
Yeah,
care where you're spending this money, right? They don't care if you've gone to a cafe or anything. What they want to know is what is the expense type, so that the type of thing that you're spending money on. So yeah, save yourself time. Like Kate said, don't bother listing all of the individual places you go to. I mean, you can, there's nothing wrong with it, but yeah, if you want a quick win, that's one of them straight away,
definitely.
right? And likewise with public transport, if you do end up getting loads of different trains, don't bother listing all of the different trains, East Anglia, Transport for London, everything. There's no point. Just create public transport, and you can put trains, buses, taxis, anything like that under
Yeah.
one supplier there. Right. If at any point you did perhaps want to amend or even fully delete a supplier, you've got these icons here. So the pencil, of course, is edit, the bin icons to get rid. All right.
I believe you can only use the delete icon though as long as you don't have an expense registered with that supplier. So if you update all your suppliers, remove them from that, change them over to a different supplier name, then you'll be able to remove it.
Yeah. So if you've created expenses using suppliers, because they're now in your accounting records, you won't be able to outright delete this supplier in particular. So that's just worth bearing in mind. Usually you're only going to use it if you've perhaps created duplicate suppliers. That's the most common one that we see, at least anyway. So, if you've created two with Amazon by mistake, just delete one of them and just use the other one instead. Cool. Okay, so let's move on to actually creating your expenses now. So go to expenses and then the expenses sub tab, as we can see here. Now, if this is the first time that you've been in your Crunch account, you will see this. Okay. If you're returning and you've given Crunch Free a go already, you'll need to use this button down here. Okay, so you'll have this if it's your very, very first expense, or if you are creating more, it's this one. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this one down here, but use whatever one you want and the one that you're seeing. So now on this form, we can pick our supplier. So these are the things we saw just a moment ago. So if I open this list up, all of them are now listed here, the ones that I created. So it's just going to be a case of picking the correct supplier. So let's go with Amazon. Okay. Now I need to enter the date. This is when I bought the expenses, when I purchased it. So you've got a calendar that you can choose from and backdate to if you are playing a bit of catch up, or you could just leave it today. You'll notice that you cannot enter expenses in the future. Obviously, if you haven't bought the item yet, you can't pay for it yet. So it's just one of those things where it will just block you from putting dates in the future. And underneath, you've got a couple of additional options like attaching a file. So this could be a receipt, a photo of the receipt's perfectly fine these days. It doesn't have to be the paper version. I mean, if you're anything like me and you have kept paper receipts, they just sit in a box somewhere and 3 months later, you can't even read them anyway. I mean, I often do that with stuff in my wallet. I've probably still got receipts from about a year ago. But
Train tickets all over the place. Yeah, I'm the same.
yeah, do you know what?
So
It's
many.
funny actually. I did actually take a batch of train tickets out of my wallet, I think yesterday or the day before, and they went back about a year and a half. I was like, why am I
Yeah,
doing these? I don't get it. But yeah, just bear in mind that you don't have to do that. Digital copies are fine these days. Take a photo of it and just store it somewhere. Whether you upload it into your account, whether you've got a folder on your computer at home, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you do have a copy of the transaction taking place. The other couple of options here are add a note. So if at any point you did want to perhaps distinguish expenses a little further, so if you are using a generic supplier like public transport and you just want to say, well, this particular journey was for TfL or this particular journey was for East Anglia or whatever it is, you can pop that in there, but it is optional, so you don't have to do it at all. The next box here, now I won't go into too much detail, but it's worth knowing about, is making an expense chargeable to a client. So what this means is, let's say you're working with somebody and they've offered to pay for your travel. What you'll need to do is actually attach the expense info, so you go out and you pay for the train fare or whatever it might be, and they're going to reimburse it to you. So you'll need to say, right, I've paid for this item on this date, enter the supplier, all the details, and then select this box here. You'll then get the opportunity to pick a client, so the person you're working with, from this drop-down menu. So I'll actually go ahead and do that just so I can show you how it works when we're raising an invoice. And this simply means that the expense item that you have originally paid for is now going to be attached to the invoice that you send to them. So this will include not only the charge for your service, but also the money that you're supposed to be reimbursed for the expense. So yeah, that's a really, really good to know option that's there as well. So just be mindful of that, because I know that is quite a frequent question actually. How do I make sure that my client pays me back for an item that they've offered to pay me back for? And that's how you do that. Adding a reference is, this is more or less the same as a note, I'll be honest. There's not much else to it. It's just another way of you further distinguishing something if you needed to or wanted to. But again, optional. In fact, all of these are optional, so use them or don't use them. It's up to you. Next, you've just got your item. So this is a description of the product or service that you're paying for. So in this example, who have I chosen? I've chosen Amazon. So let's go with, considering the circumstances at the moment, let's say I need an office chair. My back's killing me and I've had enough. So I need a new office chair, and it's automatically selected equipment cost for me, as you can see. And that's because of the supplier that I chose. So if you keep your eyes peeled on these, I'm now going to change this supplier to public transport. It's automatically changed the expense type for me. That's why it's really handy to set those default expense types. It's not going to save you hours, don't get me wrong, but it does mean that you can skip one step in the process, which is always nice. So I'll quickly change that back. Oh, actually, it's another point I should mention is keep your eyes on this here as well, the VAT rate. So Crunchfee is actually really intuitive in the way that it recognizes VAT, whether it's applicable to certain expense types. So this means that you don't have to sit there and work out, does it have VAT, doesn't it have VAT? Let the system do the work for you in that respect. So because I've got Amazon selected now, its equipment cost, it knows that there is going to be VAT applied to that expense type. If, however, I change this to public transport, keep your eye on the VAT rate here, it's now 0 rated it for me. And the reason that happens is because there are certain expense types that just don't have VAT. So public transport's one of them. You've got charitable organizations. They're actually deemed outside of the scope, so they don't get charged VAT at all. And also foreign expense items, so they get deemed as outside of scope as well, I think, don't they? They're also outside of scope.
They are outside of scope, yes.
Yeah. Just because the system's determining a lot of this for you, right? If I pressed Amazon now, it's not set in stone. I can still change this to something else, just if I did buy something from Amazon, maybe equipment cost didn't quite fit the description that well, you can still change it to anything else that you wanted it to be. So totally up to you. If it was maybe a battery pack or something that you bought, you could change it to computer consumables. And likewise with VAT as well, it still gives you the option to change it if you needed to. I know like a little while ago there was a sort of umming and ahhing about whether VAT was applicable for food. I think there still is somewhat, isn't there? Some food has it, some food doesn't have it.
Some does. It depends who you buy it from.
Yeah.
And what you're buying, I think. Some foods I think are exempt and some aren't.
Yeah, I think it
Very
is.
confusing rules.
It can be confusing. When it comes to food, just make sure you're checking your receipts. If it says that there's VAT on it, make sure you've applied the VAT rate here on it. If it doesn't, then just make sure you take it off. Yeah, I'm not really sure how the food element on the food VAT elements worked out. I've heard some bizarre stories which I won't go into now, such as like whether it comes in a box or whether they just hand it to you as a sandwich. I'm not really sure how it works.
Yeah, there's some like hot food tax and stuff like that. It's all very confusing rules about food. So just check
Yeah,
the receipt if you're not sure, and if it's on there, you'll put it on. If not,
make
take it
sure
off.
you claim it back. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, right? Don't forget, if you are VAT registered as well, you know, if there's VAT applicable on some of your items that you buy, you can actually claim it back. So it's perhaps worth looking into VAT registration, especially if you're buying lots of materials. You know, if you're spending, you know, the saying goes, if you're spending money to make money, get VAT registered, because then, you know, you're paying for the items anyway to do your job. So have a look at VAT registration, claim the VAT amount back, and at least you're getting some of the money back that you're spending to do the service in the first place. So yeah, and I guess lastly, just make sure that the amount that you're entering is the total amount as well. So that's including the VAT, right? So if I was to put in, I'm gonna, 50 quid, right? So I've put the total in, you'll see that the system separates the VAT element for me. So I haven't got to sit there and work it out at all, just let the system do the job for you, all right? So once you're happy with that, you now need to specify how it was paid for. Now, one thing to very quickly mention is that we're aware sometimes there can be delays in payments. You know, maybe you bought something a couple of days ago, but the payment didn't clear until 2 days later. All right, that's fine. You can still change. So let's say if I go back to, I bought it on the 29th, but the money didn't come out until today, that's fine. You've got the opportunity to do that as well. The important thing really isn't necessarily this date, right? The important thing is this one, because that's what's going to appear on your bank statement, and that's what has to match up correctly. So just bear that in mind. Lastly is just, how did you pay for it? So was it out of your business bank account? Was it out of your credit card account? Make sure you select the correct payment method. And then if you do have more than one bank account, you can select that from this drop-down menu here as well. That's it when it comes to expense creation. I guess that before I go ahead and save, if you are backdating and you're almost working in batches, so let's say that you are going through a bunch of pieces of equipment or travel cost or whatever it is, just use save and add similar, because then all it will do is it will save this and it will jump you straight back to this form again, so that you can rinse and repeat the same exercise again. But I'm happy with that now though, so I'm just going to go ahead and press save. Oh, well, another thing that the system does do intuitively is, if there are expense types that have a set criteria, like equipment, it'll actually tell you when you can't categorize it as that expense type. So what this has just told me is that equipment costs can only be valued at £100 or more. So I now need to rethink the expense type, which is just another reason why I'm still able to change this, even though I'd set a default expense type. So I now need to change this to low value equipment instead. I'll keep the £50 in there because that's what it was. Now it's going to let me save it. Okay, so there are safety mechanisms in place actually to make sure that you don't miscategorize something. So in a weird way, that was actually a pretty good error to demo you. So I hadn't even planned that either. So that's that was pretty good. But now that's been created, what you're going to see is basically the info about the expense you've just added. So here we can see it's Amazon. I'd selected that it was recharged, and the amount and the date of payment as well. That's it when it comes to creating expenses. The other thing I probably could show you, and will show you, in fact, is recurring expenses. So these are automated expenses. These can really, really help you speed up your bookkeeping. You don't want to have to sit there month on month stabbing in the same details every time, every week, every day, every month. So make sure whatever it is that's on standing order or direct debit, you're sorting it out as a recurring expense. So if it's your very first one, like with the expenses, you'll see this. If you have tried to have a go at some others, then you'll see this instead. So I'm going to use just this one down here in the bottom right. Very similar to the expense form that we saw. You've just got a couple of additions. So you'd still pick a supplier. So I'm going to go with, let's say, public transport. I want it to repeat once a month. If you want to change that to be weekly, yearly, you know, annual subscriptions are a thing, so you can do that as well. If you wanted to do it once a year, I'm going to leave it as once a month. I'm going to say, right, I want this to start, because usually you're going to know way in advance when the direct debit or payment's going to come out. I want it to start on the 23rd. Okay. Do I want it to end? Never. On a specific date or after a specific date? I'm going to leave that as never for now. Same options as before, adding notes, making it chargeable, adding additional references. And then I've just got to enter a description. So I'm going to go with travel card on this one. Public transport has been selected for me because of the supplier, don't forget. 0 rate because Crunchfree knows that VAT isn't applicable to certain expense types. And then the amount as well. So I'm going to put in £125. And then it asks me for the payment method. So how is it, which account is this direct debit standing order, whatever it is, coming out of? So transfer out of business. And then if you've got more than one account, select it from this drop down menu. And that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and press save. Now we've got a schedule set up. So this is telling me, right, for this supplier, you've got an amount of £125 active as a recurring, and it's next going to be, it will next create the expense on the 23rd. So all that's going to happen now is on the 23rd of each month, this expense is just going to keep automatically creating itself for me. You know, not going to save you hours, don't get me wrong, but it will certainly save you a bit of time when you're updating things like this. You could do the same with subscription costs. You know, if you've got a website and you're paying, you know, hosting costs or cloud services, you know, Dropbox or anything like that, just get them all in here, right? You save yourself a little bit of work. If you need to edit a schedule, just use the pencil icon next to it over here. And if you need to fully delete it and deactivate it, just use the bin icon to get rid of it instead. That is it. I can't think of anything else to go through with recurring expenses. What about you, Katie? Anything to add?
No, not really. I mean, I did just have a thought whilst we were talking about the question with accounting periods, just to touch on the fact that for using Crunch, we always use the tax year, so 5th and 6th of April. But you're only going to need to input information from your current year from the point you start with Crunch. So if you're starting with us now, you're only putting in information from the start of this tax year onwards. You don't need to put any historical data which predates this tax year. So just to save yourself some time so you don't accidentally enter stuff that you don't need to.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. Okay, so that's expenses in a nutshell. Hopefully that was, you know, clear enough, and it gave you guys some different tips and quick ways of updating your records in next to no time. Next up, then we'll move on to sales. So this is your clients and your invoicing. Now, as I briefly touched on, I mean, you can still create manual invoices and send them out via your own personal email. Don't get me wrong, but you've got a perfectly capable suite here where you no longer need to do that. So you can raise it, you can create the invoice, you can issue it, and you can email it directly through your account. And that way you've got a nice and tidy record of, okay, which invoices are outstanding, which invoices have been paid. You know, what am I waiting on? Do I want to send someone a draft or an estimate invoice? So we'll go through all of that now. And like I suggested with suppliers, if you've got a list of clients that you already work with, you know, say you have been trading for some time, just go through the list and start adding your clients first. So to do that, go to sales and then clients. Obviously, if you're brand new, this is what you're going to be met with. Okay, so it's going to ask you to update some of your settings. So your business address being one of them. So I'm going to quickly pop that in here. I mean, I'm making one up, but make sure you do put your actual trading address in. Okay, then I'm going to save it. So once you've got your business address entered in, all you now need to do is start entering your client info. So use this button in the top right over here, new client. And from here, it's going to ask you to enter a company name, but it's worth bearing in mind that you can also put individuals' names in here as well. So whether it's a company you're working for or whether it's an individual that you're working with, it doesn't matter. Just put that in here. This is your point of reference for that client. So I'll go with BBC, let's say. Next up, you need to enter a default invoice currency. So you've got a handful of different currencies that you could charge in using Crunch Free. I'll keep that as pound sterling. And what this means is whenever I raise an invoice for this client, it's going to automatically send it out in pound sterling, which is great. Payment terms, be as kind or not kind as you want, totally up to you. So I'm going to be really mean and just give them 2 days to pay. And then next, you've got contact details. Now, I'm not going to go through every single bit on this form. I am conscious of time, and actually, you don't need to enter all of it. So I'm going to cover the essentials that you need to enter so that you can start using the invoice features. So contact details is super important. The system needs to know where it's sending the invoice once you're happy with it. So press add a contact, add them in here, and then add their email address here. These two, don't worry about them. You can add them if you want, but these two don't actually stop you using the email feature. And then make sure you check the include an email box at the end. Now, it is worth noting if you are working with someone like a large organization, but you've got different jobs for different departments or people, don't worry about creating different clients, you know, with BBC John Smith or BBC Jane Smith or whoever it is. Just simply add the other people that you want under the client as a new contact, and then you can choose specifically who you want each of your invoices to go to within that company. Right, so I'll delete it using the red X, of course. I'm happy with that though, so I'm going to crack on. Billing address is their trading address. Now, this is really, really important, mainly because once you've issued an invoice, it's now a legally binding document. Okay, so you want to make sure that you've got the exact address, the correct address listed on that invoice. So I'm gonna, again, I'm being a bit hypocritical here by just making one up, but don't do that. Make sure that you do put your client's exact address in. Okay, sales invoice note, you don't have to add it. I'll quickly skim over this. This is just if you want to add like a thank you for your service message. If you want to add details about your website or anything like that, you can do so, that's fine. It's probably more or less it for an invoice note, isn't it, Katie? Or is there any other reason that you'd want to add one?
No, that's the main reason if you just want to add any personalized message to it, really. And you can set that just as a default, or you can update it per invoice.
Yeah. I mean, it's there if you want it. Again,
Yeah.
it's just a nice to know about, that's all. Bank account details probably goes without saying, but people are going to want to know which account to pay you into. So make sure that's checked. You just do that, and then you select the bank account that you want to be paid into. Now, once you've selected the account, it will generate the information that you created when setting up the account, and that will then be attached to the invoice for you. All right. So that's just a sure way that your end client has got all of the info they need to make the payment to you within sufficient time as well. Now, the last thing to do, if you want to, but I would really recommend doing this, is setting up automated late payment reminders. And two reasons. One, nobody really likes to have those awkward, can I have my money conversations. Two, the system will actually start generating those emails based on a time frame of your choosing. So let's say that my rather ungenerous 2-day payment terms weren't met, and I'm now unhappy and I want to start chasing them. I could then set automated reminders to go out every 2 days, continually for 2 days until I get my money. Okay? You can set this to whatever you want it to be, all right? And you can also specify whether you just want to give yourself a gentle nudge about it, or if you want to give yourself a reminder as well as the end client as well. Most of the time, it makes sense to make sure that you've got both boxes checked. But I would suggest if you do have now the you and your client's contact, you can't unfortunately personalize the late payment reminder content. And I'm not entirely sure in truth what the exact wording in it is. I mean, it's not going to be anything horrible. It's probably more just like, hey, you were supposed to pay me on this date, but I haven't received the money, something like that.
I believe it actually just sends out a copy of the invoice again. I
And
think
it
it
just
reads
says
it.
overdue,
Yeah, yeah,
does it?
I believe so.
Yeah. Oh, what? So it just lists it as an overdue invoice and they haven't met the payment terms. Okay, that makes
I
sense.
believe that's what goes out.
Yeah, well, if you want to leave it like that, then that's fine. If, however, you've got a bit more of a personal relationship with your client, and it probably makes more sense in that respect to just tick yourself and then just give them a polite nudge on your own, whether that's a call or an email. It's up to you. All right, so I'll go ahead and leave that just giving myself the nudge for the time being. I'm going to press save. There we go. Our client's now been created for us. What this now enables us to do is to start raising invoices using that client. So if you go to sales and then invoices, in regards to creating a new one though, you've got two options. You can either use this button here. So if it's your very first invoice, this will display. Once you've created your first invoice, that will disappear and you're left with this button up here. Okay, so use this button up here, new invoice. Once you've selected that, you get a drop down menu to start choosing your clients from. So if I press this, we'll see now BBC's in here. If at any stage you're raising an invoice for the sake of bookkeeping and you've forgotten to set the client up here, don't panic. You can just use this button, create the client from here, and then it will bring you back to this screen afterwards anyway. All right, so that's just a nice to know. So I'm going to go ahead and press BBC. And from here, you'll see that a lot of the info is now populated for me, right? So the currency's there. I'm happy with that. That's what I specified when I set the client up. All I need to do now is actually say, right, when do I want this to issue? So you can either type it in, you can use the calendar, or you can press today if you are doing it day by day. I guess it's handy to use the calendar if you are doing a little bit of backdating. So if you're playing a bit of catch up, you don't need to resend the invoice to your client. You're just entering it for the sake of keeping accounting records up to date. You can go as back as far as you like in that case. I won't touch on these for now. It's worth pointing out at this stage, with the things that we have sort of brushed over a little bit, you know, like we're going to do with client reference and POs. There's a help center that's got tons and tons and tons of resource materials on there. So guides, walkthroughs, step by steps, you know, you name it, it's on there. So if you do want to find out anything that we haven't covered, jump on there. And actually at the end of this session, I'm going to provide you with all of those links anyway. So I just didn't want you to think I was skipping things for the sake of it, because we will highlight those at the end. My payment terms are there. My super kind payment terms, and now all I need to do is add a line item, right? So I now need to explain what it is that I'm charging them for. So add line item. My description is just going to be whatever the service is that you're providing. You know, actually it probably makes more sense to say something like this. So a graphics design service. The net amount is what I'm charging for that service. So total cost, and then I'm going to go ahead and press save. Simple as that. You'll see that there's £1,500 applied. There's no VAT applied on it because I'm not VAT registered. If you do get VAT registered, and the system will recognize that as well. At the moment, Crunchfree doesn't currently support sole trader VAT registrations yet, I don't think, do we? But I think that is coming very, very shortly. So we'll keep you posted on that as well. And if for any reason you wanted to add a discount, you know, say it is a friend of yours and you're giving them mates rates, you know, normally you charge 1,500 quid, but because they're a good pal, you want to knock off, let's say, you know, 100 quid, save it, and then you can reflect that on the invoice as well. If you want to edit any of them, edit, use the pencil icon. If you want to delete any of them, use the red X icon. Next up, you've got an invoice note. So this is what we touched on earlier when setting up the client. If you did add a personalized note to it, that would appear here. Bank account's already checked because of the way we set up the client. It's even got the bank account that we set as well with the details. And lastly, the late payment reminder. That really is it when it comes to raising invoices. You can also attach supporting documents if you wanted to as well. So if, for instance, I did have the recharged expense, so the one I'd set earlier, if I now change my client to the one that I'd assigned the recharge to, you'll notice now I have this button available where I didn't on the previous client. So if I select this, it's now going to note, it's going to find, that I'm charging them for an office share, bit of a weird recharged expense, but we'll go with it. And I'm going to include the details. Ooh, pop it in here, a little description of what it actually is. And now that's being included, and it's also added onto the service cost as well. So let's go with that one. Go down. You've got two options here. You can save it as a draft, or you can just go ahead and preview an issue. Now, saving it as a draft is just it's not a legal document yet. You can edit it, you can use it to send quotes or estimates. It doesn't tie anything to anybody when it's in a draft status. If you're happy with it though, and you do want to proceed and send it out, use this one, preview an issue. Okay. At this stage, it has now created that draft, but it's still, you're going to have the opportunity to edit it. That's fine. If you do perhaps spot, oh, well, I've made a mistake on the amount or the payment terms or whatever, fine. It gives you one last ditch effort to make that change if you need to. If you're happy though, and you do just want to email, you want this button here, issue and email invoice. When you press this, it will say, right, who do you want to email? So going back to what I said earlier about different contacts in the same organization, it will actually present you with a list of the contacts that you'd created for that client. You can also change the email subject if you wanted to. This is all just bog standard placeholder text, so change it to whatever it is that you want it to be. And then lastly, the body content of the email as well. This is again just generic placeholder text, so take it or leave it, change it if you want. Okay. If you're happy, I'm now going to go ahead and press send, and you'll see the system has issued the invoice and it's emailed it to them for me. Okay. And at this point, it's now showing down here. So it says it's outstanding, so that I'm still waiting for the money. It was issued today. It's due on this day. It even verifies that you have sent it via an email to them. And then you've got your total amounts over here as well. So super quick, super easy. Don't think there's anything more that I could say about the invoicing itself, unless you've got anything you want to add. Okay.
No, just to say, if you work with an external invoicing system, we recommend that you still raise a copy of your invoices in here, and just rather than using the email and issue option, just use the issue button, and that will create a copy which is only in Crunch. It doesn't send it to anyone externally then.
Okay.
So it just gives you a record so that you can record your payments against it and see how much you're earning in your account.
That's a good shout. That's a good shout. Now, let's say I want to make this recurring. So it was this one. Go to options, set up recurring. Now you've got a scheduler that you can arrange, like you did with the recurring expenses as well. So how often do you want it to repeat? When does it start? Does it end? Do you want it to be issued and emailed to the client? So you can check both of these boxes as well. But as Kate said, the only thing it won't do is automatically mark that you've received payment for it. That is something that you'll, once you do get the payment for it, you'll come back to this area here. In fact, on any invoice that you receive payment for, you come back to this area and use the options menu on the relevant invoice in question, and then you just go to record client payment. So you press that, standard type of form again, client, the amount, when did you receive the payment, how did you receive it, paid into the business bank account, how much was received, and then you'll see that the amount has set itself against the invoice for you here. Okay, and then you go ahead, press save. Now it shows that the invoice has been paid. So if I go back to the entire list, you'll see there's a differentiation between, right, that's paid, that's still outstanding in that case. Right, so yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, just make sure that you are recording client payments after you receive the payment, because the system's just got no way of knowing what that money is being received into the account for. I think, okay, we've got another question here, but I think, again, being conscious of time, I'm going to come back to any of the other ones that are left outstanding. The other one was about training and equipment, so I'll come back to you on that one. But yes, with regards to invoicing, that is it. Okay, so you've got recurring invoices you can send, preview, issue and email them. Expenses we've covered now as well. And I think lastly, before we wrap it all up, there's two final points here, is that we were going to give you a rundown of bank reconciliation. Now, it's one of those things where a lot of the accounting records that you hold, people, accountants won't actually touch them unless you've performed some form of bank reconciliation and you're verifying that the data that you're entering is accurate against your bank statements. So the best way to put it is, you've got data housed in one way and your bank statement over here. Do they synchronize? Do they match exactly together? And that means dates, amounts, balances of your bank accounts and things like that. It's really, really important that you do bank reconciliation at the very, very least once a month, so that you are keeping all of your affairs in order. And also, if you are using bookkeeping software like this, it helps you use some of the real-time information in the account as well. So you'll know financially where you're at. You'll know how much tax you've got to pay somebody. You'll know how much you're spending on certain expenses, and whether you could make a decision on perhaps buying a vehicle if you're spending loads of money on public transport and things like that. So yeah, it's really, really critical that you are doing bank reconciliation. And we are going to do another masterclass. I think Katie mentioned it at the start anyway, because it is, while it's not difficult, there's so much to it.
It's just a lot to cover in one
Yeah,
session, like when you're trying to talk about other things as well.
we want to make sure that you're able to get the best understanding of it, because while it's easy, undoubtedly, like anything, there's always some problems, and we want to go through things like that and how you fix stuff as well. Because while I'd like to think that it's absolutely perfect, there are some occasions where you do need a little bit of help, and to identify what problems are and how to fix them. So yeah, keep your eyes open for that email coming through about that invitation as well. That will be really, really handy. So yeah, that's bank rec. Again, I guess the last thing to finish up on bank rec is just, it goes back to the open banking thing that we were mentioning earlier. Set it up, get yourself ready for bank reconciliation, and the best way you can do that is by sorting out your open banking connection if you can as well. If you can't sort that out, don't worry. There is ways that you can manually, like I said, import stuff, and there's tons of materials on our help center to guide you through that process anyway, which leads me nicely on to the next and final point, is the help center, right? So with your Crunch account, you'll actually have access to an in-app, which I think, with an in-app help center, which is up here in the top right. So it's a little bit hidden away, admittedly, but you've got this button here, can we help? So as soon as you press this, it now gives you access to our complete range of help center articles. So you don't need to step away from your account. It really bothers me personally sometimes when I'm looking at something and I have to go somewhere else like Google to search for something, and then I've got to go back and forth. Don't worry. Okay, if there's anything that you need to find, whether that is to reconcile your bank, whether that is to have a look at CSV, manually importing and uploading them, it's all here, right? And this will also change depending on which section of your account you're in. So if I'm in the sales section, it will bring me articles that are related to invoices. If I'm in the expenses section, it will bring me articles that are related to expenses. So it's a really intuitive way of finding the help that you need. But if all else fails, just search for something in here instead. Okay, and it'll actually bring you search results like this, for instance. Okay, so keep that in mind. You've got all of this here, and underneath you've got things like business guides, you've got knowledge articles. This is our Crunch Knowledge Center, so that's also worth a nosy around on as well, because that has things like updated tax thresholds, how much you should take out of your business, how much, how to operate in the most tax efficient way, expenses you can and can't claim for, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's worth having a look at if you get a chance. Lastly, you've just got a collection of help center videos. So if you wanted to find out in visually how to do something, you've got an entire series there waiting for you to watch. And then the last couple of points are just whether you want to upgrade your package at any stage and actually let Crunch help you with your accounting affairs. Obviously, we'd love to have you on board, and I hope that this is just a taste of the kind of support that Crunch can offer you when you do become a client. But I think that's probably more or less it from myself. Oh, there is one thing actually that I forgot at the very, very beginning, but I'm going to swing back to it, is if you ever needed to update any of your settings in your account, you'll see something like this. Obviously, it will have your own personal name in there. Go to settings, your account settings here, and then you've got this list that you can update and change as well. So, if you are trading under a specific name, you can update that here. Business address, you can update. You can also upload business logos as well, so that they're on your invoices. And then actually, I think the good way to end this is actually exporting data. So once you've done all of this, I guess the question is, well, what do you do with it? You've put all your info into the account. You spent, hours updating all of your records and making sure it's all nice and tidy. What now? And it goes back, I guess, to the get an accountant, scenario. So you're going to need a self-assessment. There's no two ways about it. That all sole traders have to complete a self-assessment each year. I'm aware that some people are perfectly fine doing it on their own, and that's cool. Carry on. There's no need to pay someone if you know how to do it. But you still need the data. So in that case, just go here, go to export data, and then from this list, you can pick exactly what it is that you need. You can export the entire thing. You can pick specific things if that's all you needed to. But yeah, ultimately, you're going to have to give this info to someone if you're not doing it yourself as well. I think that's probably it for myself. Katie, did you want to add anything on?
No, I mean, it might be worth just touching quickly on our add-ons section, because we've got some really helpful business add-ons in there. Some of them are free, some of them are paid for. So I mean, we've got links to the banks that we're tied with. So if you do want to get a business account set up, you can get some information and some details in here, which is really, really handy. We've also got Ask an Accountant. So if you want to just have a one-off chat with us, you've got the option to book that in there. If you want to use our additional mobile apps for recording expenses, so you can download Snap and it gives you the chance to activate it through here. So you can try it out. You get 15 free per month. That's every month. Or if you love using it and want to use it all the time, you can have unlimited usage for an extra $3.50 plus back there. Trip Catcher, if you want to capture all your mileage, if you're driving for work, you've got the option to add that on. Loads of extra bits in there. So definitely have a little scroll through that when you've got a couple of minutes and see if there's anything that will help you out.
It's a very, very good point. Yeah, and just in case you missed it, that's literally just in the lower left hand corner of all of your accounts. So it's worth keeping an eye on, because yeah, like Kate said, there's probably something in there that will help you. And especially if it's free, I'm going to go back to the open banking scenario. If it's free, use it. Why not?
Exactly.
No,
I guess one final thing as well, I mean, Crunch Free is still quite new. We're still adding new features all the time. So if you've got any feedback from us, things that you think work really, really well, things that don't work quite so well, there's a little tab on the side here, which if you just click that to open, then it will just give you the option to say how you're feeling, and it will give you the option to add a little bit of text underneath if you want to, just to feedback to us on how we're doing for you.
That's it.
That's
Perfect. All right, I think then that's probably it. Hopefully you've all found it really helpful and informative. I'm aware that we've run slightly over, so apologies if I have kept some of you longer than intended, but hopefully for good reason. Again, if you've got any questions, if there are things that you're unsure about, use the help center to your heart's content. I think the last thing for me to do is actually provide you with that info. So if I quickly jump back now to the slide deck, as I say, we're going to send these out to you. So these, it provides you with a recap what we covered, and these pink links here will take you to the specific Help Center articles that you need for those particular areas. And then it'll also contain some useful resources like the Crunch Free Help Center link. Obviously, feel free to jot it down now if you do have a pen or something available, as well as that Crunch Knowledge website that I mentioned earlier as well. Lastly, if you have got any form of social media, catch us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We've also got a YouTube channel as well, so feel free to check that out. There's hundreds of videos on there which you can watch. And then lastly, my final point, again, we're always looking at ways to make life easier for the freelancer and contractor. So we're aiming to create a community, so a forum of sorts where everyone can get together, talk about their experiences, get help from one another as well, and also ask us questions. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We'll no doubt be sending out some big release about it at some point as well. But I think that's pretty much it. So I do want to say thank you very, very much for all of your time today. Hopefully it's been really helpful and you now know some new ways of working with your Crunch Free account and how to get the most out of it. But yeah, that's it from me. So thank you very much. Katie, did you want to finish up on anything?
Yeah, just say thank you very much for attending. Hope you found it useful, and hopefully we'll see you again.
But thank you again, and I hope you have a nice day.
Bye bye.